Hello everybody and welcome to the first ever DIVA magazine Lesbian Visibility Week. Now you'll have to bear with us because I've got the world's most horrific lockdown routes here for you, live on Zoom, but we have got a wonderful panel. Now we'll run you through it all, but basically DIVA magazine have done some brilliant and interesting research which looks at the fact that lots of LGBT women feel that LGBT events are way too male-centric and they often don't feel that they're geared towards them. So joining me, I have a fantastic panel of Wonder Women. We've got Ali Camps from Pride in London. We've got Jo Caulfield from Norwich Pride. We've got Moud Goba from UK Black Pride and Alex Scott from the very new and dynamic Virtual Pride. So welcome everybody. I was going to get you to do a sort of cheesy wave, but that just feels very sort of 90s TV, doesn't it? But should we just wave? Why not? The world's ending, we might as well. So let's look at some of the key findings of this research, first of all, because there's some interesting stats that DIVA have pulled out for us here today. Interestingly, almost 3/4 of people feel specifically that LGBT events are less aimed at women, and only 16% of women from our community are actually even turning up to those events. So Ali, let me start with you. You know, you spend all year round trying to design a Pride in London which is inclusive. Are you consciously thinking about how to entice more women to Pride, or is it not as kind of obvious as that?
All the time I'm thinking about that, because inclusion and diversity within Pride organisations is absolutely crucial, and I think we'd all probably acknowledge that that Pride has been seen in this country as a bit of a sort of a gay man movement more than it has been for gay women, and I think that's something that probably most of us on this panel would want to change. But I think it's clear that one size doesn't fit all, and it's really important to understand and to build around what works for women. So a few years back, I brought back the women's stage at Pride in London, which is now in Leicester Square, which is a small step, but for me, the difficulty is the big question is, how do we get women to want to turn up? Because actually things change when people turn up and start changing things by virtue of their presence. And the more guys that turn up to events, then the more likely it is that those events will feel like events for guys. So the big question is, how do we get women to participate?
And Maud, what about with UK Black Pride? Obviously a new event, but are you still conscious that it needs to be not too male-centric, or are you just trying to get as many people there as possible?
Yes, I think we obviously deliberately plan to be more inclusive of everyone, and with the main focus on women, with the main focus on disadvantaged people in our community who often fall through the cracks of support in our community. So we do plan with the main focus on women, trans women, migrants, people who often don't get that kind of inclusion and support.
And when it comes to intersectionality, what are the sort of specific challenges? Because there are sensitivities specifically around UK Black Pride.
Okay, I don't know if I would use the sensitivities, but obviously there are a lot of intersectional challenges compared to other people, say for a Black lesbian who is a mother and who is a migrant. There are lots of intersectional challenges people face. So it's ensuring that there is support and that those needs are met and addressed, and those people who will experience challenges such as racism as well. It's not only us fighting homophobia and fighting for a safe space as LGBTQI people, but it's also ensuring that there is safe spaces and free from racism within the LGBT community, within the LGBT events and spaces. So there are lots of those challenges to do with your race, to do with your gender, and for most of the people we work with to do with your migrant status. And if we go further into it, there are also young LGBT people, young LGBT women who experience a lot of challenges, including homelessness, and they're economically disempowered. Are they able to access these events? Most times they're not, especially if they're not working, or they're young, they've just come out of school, or if they're new migrants or asylum seekers or refugees.
You're quite right, and they're challenges rather than sensitivities. And do you think misogyny is still a big problem? Because we talk about misogyny as if it's a kind of heterosexual issue in many ways, but misogyny is also rife in the LGBT community as well, Maud.
Sorry, I muted myself. Yes, misogyny is a big problem, and we need to continually challenge it. Just because someone is from our community and they're the G, or it doesn't mean that they are not misogynistic. So it's something that we continually have to address and have to be aware of, and have to know that it happens. So we can't just say because they're LGBT, they're part of the LGBT community, they are free of prejudices, or they're not ignorant. There's a lot of ignorance, there's a lot of misogyny, racism, and sometimes it has to be addressed, it has to be challenged. And if we're a woman and we're not very visible, we're not being heard, or our voices are not out there, then we will continue to experience these challenges, even within our own communities where we should feel safe.
And Jo, just going to bring you in here, because of course it's not as simple as just excluding men from the conversation. How do you make men feel part of the event whilst also enticing women to come to the event? It's a kind of fine balance, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things to think about, I guess, one of the things we think about is, what are we proud of? Like, what's our community proud of, and what are we celebrating or protesting at the event? And Norwich Pride was founded by a group of lesbians, or a collective of local activists, 12 years ago. And I think one of the things that's been really great is they've always tried to make sure that the people who are involved in organising our event represent our community, because I think if you've got a cross-section of the LGBT community involved in organising it, it inevitably means that those people know, or have a better understanding of, what different members of our community might enjoy or might want from an event. So I think you're right, it is about finding a balance, and it also is thinking about, well, how do we celebrate the diversity within our community, and also making sure that people can engage with it in a way that means something to them. So, for example, we're looking at putting in quiet spaces during Pride, because for some people, actually being in a crowd of 10,000 people is in itself a barrier. It's incredibly overwhelming and difficult to engage with. How do we involve communities of faith? How do we make sure that they're a really visible part of our event? And then women within that, I think it's really interesting how sometimes, I think, in the LGBT community, and Maud was talking about this really eloquently, sometimes we think we're sort of above societal prejudices, but actually our events can just replicate those if we're not careful. And so we've got to think about how do we actually address that with some deliberate actions.
And Alex, obviously virtual Pride is a kind of exciting new frontier. Is it easier online in a way? Can people kind of feel more welcome? Is it less intimidating, or do the same sort of prejudices still exist?
I think because we're opening this up to an event where anybody practically in the world with an internet connection can join, I think there are different issues around safeguarding and keeping that space that we're creating a safe place for people to come and join in, an inclusive space for people to come and join in. But I think replicating kind of what Jo was saying there about, just because it's got the stamp of LGBTQ on it, we can't assume that just because you're part of that community, you're going to want to come to that event. And I think it's really about, working with the other prides that are involved in virtual Pride and picking up on, their kind of expertise in what their knowledge, in what they bring to their own individual prides, and how we can kind of merge that and bring a community together online. But absolutely, I think there's a real beauty of this situation that we find ourselves in, where we can really do something that brings anyone and everyone together, regardless of where you live or who you are.
Ali, how important are lesbian role models? We're talking about lesbian visibility. You know, is it just an obvious tokenistic thing to do, or actually does it really have an impact?
No, I mean, I think role models in any walk of life are massively important. And, you know, I think particularly when you're thinking about women, not just in LGBTQI terms, but just life in general, the importance of having women to look up to, women who are modelling the kind of behaviours and success that make a difference in the world, that's absolutely crucial. And, you know, I think what we're seeing in these times is it's almost like there's a new activism coming through. I mean, partly to do with the climate emergency, potentially partly to do with heightened political awareness. But I think that there are lots of young women who are becoming increasingly more activist, and whose voices need to be heard just as much as those of us who've been around the block a few times, so to speak. I just, you know, anybody can inspire anybody. It doesn't matter who you are. You know, I have as much to learn from somebody who's half my age as the other way around. And it's, you know, some of the most inspirational people I know come from different cultures, different backgrounds, different life experiences. And the important thing is to be, for me, is to be open and to be collaborative and to raise each other up, because I think, you know, women are perhaps not as good at that as we need to be. And, you know, that's something that we could learn from gay men's ability to network. We could be much better at that. And we, you know, we need to raise each other up, because, you know, we are up against it. We talked about misogyny, you know, we talked about disadvantage in an economic sense, in a social sense, on many, many levels. And it is our job, those of us who have a voice and who have the ability to influence people, I think, to raise awareness of women's situations in every sense, and to promote each other, to, you know, give each other a pat on the back and a bit of a leg up where we can.
And of course, with the rise of Instagram and social media, you know, you can be your own publicists now, and you can talk a lot. You know, you can use selfies, or you can kind of do Instagram stories. Maud, how helpful has it been for you at UK Black Pride to have role models to promote the event? Has that been a kind of useful tool?
Yeah, of course, role models, I think, are really important. I think I'll speak for myself. When I was a young lesbian in Zimbabwe, I certainly needed to see some role models, and to see, because I was in a space where I was feeling a lot of shame and everything against me. So it would have been great to see role models then. But still, as I was sort of growing and I found some women who are role models, it's good to see somebody who is like you, somebody who inspires you and supports you to, almost, you don't have to see them, but to just, for them to be visible is really, really important, because it does a lot in supporting someone's self-esteem of who they are. We see a lot of young people who come through to Black Pride every year. Most of them are just waiting for that. And for them, it's that visibility of seeing other women who are the same as them. It's so important, it's so massive, and sometimes it's also us providing those mentors to those young people. And like Ali said, it's not only young people, we all see role models in each other in different spaces.
Alex, a lot of your following is also online. Have you had a lot of lesbians or people that might be closeted who have kind of reached out to you and seen you as an icon or somebody that they can relate to?
I think, are you talking to me, Helen?
Yeah. Sorry, Helen. I'm sorry.
Not to worry. But maybe that's my alter ego.
My apologies.
Can you just repeat that question again for me?
Yeah, a lot of your following is online, and you have lots of people who kind of look up to you in a way. Have you had people that have reached out to you that have kind of, you know, seen themselves in you in many ways?
Yeah, I think probably every week I'll have a conversation, you know, online about, you know, help, or people want advice, I think, more than anything. And I think it's important for me to not only be kind of open and visible and, you know, really kind of open about having conversations around it, but also kind of knowing where to send people for many different things. You know, I don't think that my, you know, experience, my knowledge, or my, you know, life can truly represent every person, every other lesbian out there. And I don't try to sort of offer advice in the sense that, you know, giving people options of what to do, but sending them to resources that they can use to really kind of help them and support them. And you know, we have so much variety in our stories, and I think being just open and talking about it and not kind of shying away from saying this is who I am certainly helps people, I think, start the conversation with me. And then, you know, I do feel like a certain responsibility to offer them a resource of where to go.
Can I just jump in there, because I think that's what you said there is really crucial, is that everybody's story and everybody's journey is valid. And sometimes I see out in the community people talking about, you know, people who've come out later in life, or whatever, whose journey to being their authentic self hasn't been kind of classic. And they're no less valid. And so for women who might be watching this, who are feeling the shame that Maud talked about, who have a fear of being who they are, you know, I think it's important to say that it doesn't matter how you get to where you need to be. The important thing is that you get to express who you are, and that you get to experience that pride in who you are, in a way that makes sense for you. And I just wanted to say that, because I know that, you know, there is a tendency for women to come out later in life. The research shows that. And I think it's really important that we stand with those women and that we validate their experience and say to them that that's, you know, that's all okay.
Yeah.
Do you think women conform socially? I mean, the evidence suggests that women do conform socially, and then they come out later in life in a way that men don't. I guess when we're talking about icons as well, and Helen, I can bring you in again here. Do you think, you know, we're still suffering from imposter syndrome in a way? You know, you are an icon to lots of people, and yet you're still saying, you know, I can't speak for everybody, like I'm not an expert, and yet lots of people do look up to you.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a certain amount of imposter syndrome, but also I think knowing that my story is one that is heard so often. I think for me it's less about imposter syndrome and more about raising the voices of, or raising the stories that aren't told anywhere. I think, you know, I'm in a really privileged position. I'm white, I'm, you know, cisgendered, I've had a kind of very easy time with my sexuality and my journey because of the way that I present myself as a very feminine lesbian woman, and so I think what's important for me more than anything, you know, not so much I have this sense of imposter syndrome, but making sure that I have you know, taking that responsibility seriously to raise the voices of people who aren't heard, who aren't seen on television, in the media, in books, you know, because I think that's where people really struggle, where they don't see themselves, you know, and then it's like, well, you know, they'll come to me because they know that they can have this really honest, open conversation with me, and then, you know, what I then want to do is kind of help them to find their reflection, I guess, and to be able to understand themselves and their intersection or their community, because I think, you know, education is ultimately what's going to bring us together and make us stronger as, you know, LGBT women. So.
And Jo, of course, Helen makes a good point there. You know, it's not just about the LGBT community, it's also about the mainstream as well. You know, there are very few role models for LGBT women. Do you think that has an impact on the events that we plan as well?
Yeah, I think role modelling is really important, and I know that particularly in Norwich we've got some really well-known local activists who've been involved in Pride from the start, and those women are brilliant trailblazers, doing things like, for example, I think also thinking about how you can do that outside of the one event in the year is really important. And so we've got lots of offshoots of Pride. So we've got Sing with Pride, which is a choir that meets every week. And one of the women involved in Norwich Pride founded Proud Canaries, which is the LGBT Norwich City Supporters Club, and was involved with Three Lions Pride and led that. And they went to Russia as part of the World Cup. So we're doing things where we can make sure that women are visible, but also that people can engage with something that might not be just the event on the day, but actually helps them be part of a community throughout the year, because it might be quite a lot to ask of somebody if they feel kind of outside of a community, or they feel that, you know, for whatever reason, it's hard for them to engage. And I think we have to realise that it can be quite intimidating, particularly if we're talking about somebody who's just come out or is just exploring something in themselves, to then go to an LGBT event. You're sort of saying something about yourself there, aren't you? You're saying, I should go to this place and meet these people and feel part of it. And that's quite a big ask. And so if we can look at different ways to build community throughout the year, then it's more likely that people are going to know somebody who might be going to the event, and that might help them, or be part of something on the day that feels, you know, more easier to engage with. Is, I suppose, a softer landing. And we've tried to do that, to build a grassroots community across Norwich that you know, exists 365 days of the year, and not just in the last weekend in July.
Totally agree with that. I couldn't agree more with what you've just said. I mean, our research as Pride in London shows that people actually, our community expects Pride to be a year-round effort. And that's something that we've been working on, like you, for the past few months. And actually, we've launched a new brand called Coming Out, which I personally think should be rebranded Staying In, for the duration of this. But Pride in London Coming Out, it is there we're aggregating all of the grassroots events from right across all of our communities, and they're all digital, so people can go to Coming Out and find something every day of the week that is going to suit them and that they can be a part of. I think for women, you know, we know that women don't just want kind of events in bars. That's not, you know, that's not, it doesn't tick all the boxes. Sure, for some of us that's important, but there is a demand out there for more variety, and that's one of the reasons why we developed Coming Out. So if you're a woman and you're running an event, then register it on Coming Out. And if you're a woman who wants to get involved in events, then have a look on Coming Out, because I think that, you know, helping our communities to engage at this time of kind of self-isolation and social distancing is super important, because loneliness is a very, very big factor within our community. And there will be lots of people, particularly young people, who are in situations in their family homes where they're not able to be themselves. And so having resources and access to resources at this time is just vital.
I mean, you make a good point. Of course, the elephant in the room, the fact that we're all on Zoom, is that we are in the middle of lockdown, and that brings with it its own issues. Obviously, all of the Pride events are pretty much cancelled this year. What plans are you putting in place at the moment, Ali, to make Pride live on virtually and in many other ways? Because, you know, that's the world we live in now.
Yeah, so Pride in London is postponed, and we are looking at what our options are for later on in the year. So that's one important thing to say. We had already launched our campaign for this year, which is You, Me, Us, We. And we will be activating that across the summer, just as we would have done, but doing it virtually, doing it digitally. And we're really excited about some of the plans that we've got for that, which I can't talk about right now. But you know, there's lots of stuff in the pipeline, and life goes on. It just means that we need to adjust in ways that reflect the situation that we're living in. There will be a global Pride that coincidentally will be happening on the 27th of June, which would have been Pride in London Day had the June date gone ahead. There's obviously virtual Pride. There's lots of stuff that's going on, and I think it's a time for us to use our creativity and use our imaginations, and to find different ways to get our message out there and be a force for good.
Which brings us on nicely, Helen, to Virtual Pride. How are you guys, working behind the scenes at the moment, trying to make the event as kind of inclusive to women and to everybody, really?
I think, the fact that we can do this online, and the fact that we have the support of lots of different Pride events that already take place, and to point out that it's a charity event, and it's to raise funds for other prides. We've got Norwich, Cumbria, Weston-super-Mare Pride involved, and like I said earlier, it's kind of taking their expertise, taking their experience and knowledge of what they know works at their prides, and really kind of driving that into Virtual Pride, and really listening to what people want. I think keeping the ethos of that Pride is a protest is really important, and kind of maintaining that message. There's going to be a Pride march at 5 o'clock where people can video themselves marching around their living rooms or around their gardens. But in terms of kind of making it more inclusive, particularly for women, for LGBT women, I think really focusing on the research that DIVA's come up with is just phenomenal and so helpful for, I think, all of us that are here on this Zoom, and taking those kind of key messages and now implementing them into what we can do to further be inclusive. It's really interesting that I think it was 79% of women feel safer at home, and I think this might be a really interesting time, now that we're all stuck indoors, to kind of hear from women on what do they want to see. And I think remaining very open and encouraging people to come to us and asking us, giving us what they want. And I think we can provide that because we're in this virtual space. And again, working with Switchboard to provide kind of information support, which is really important, alongside, the fun and performance aspect. But yeah, kind of just being really open and being really active in kind of seeking out what it is that people want to see.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point, Maud. As we see, lots of women feel safer at home. We've also seen the kind of death in many ways of the gay bar. Does that kind of put more pressure on Pride organisations to sort of create a space for LGBT women?
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question again?
Of course. We've seen kind of the death of the gay bar, and this research from DIVA has shown that lots of women feel safer being at home. Does that put more pressure on Pride organisations to create a safe space for LGBT women?
I'm not sure about putting more pressure, but it's something that as Pride organizations, we should be doing already to provide that safe space for women, for LGBT women. So I don't think it's pressure, even if the gay bars are closing, but it's a chance for Pride organizations to relook. It's a chance for us to engage with people in our communities to actually find out what people want. And rightly, like everybody's doing at the moment, it's utilizing this time to engage with people. At UK Black Pride, we will be also, it was cancelled, rightly so. We are also going digital at the moment, and we've got quite a few events lined up. But what this time is giving us is the chance to hear what people want. So I think there's sometimes lack of engagement with our community. So it's time to reach out to women to hear what they want. I know that sometimes the research says that they feel safer at home. It's time to ask people why, what are some of the, how can we change things to ensure that they attend events? What would they want to see more of? It's time to tailor make events to be more inclusive of everybody.
And I think it's good to end on a positive note, because as you say, you could kind of look at these figures and think, oh, this is all rather depressing, but there is an optimistic time, and it is an opportunity. So before we wrap up, Jo, just from you, do you think things are getting better? Is the community still really misogynistic, or are you feeling hopeful? Tell me.
I think that's a phrase that we have in the LGBT community, isn't it? It gets better, and I think it's a really important one, and we have to inspire hope. And yeah, I think it is getting better. I think there will always be, Pride will always be a protest, because there will always be you know, an injustice. There will always be discrimination, unfortunately, but there will always be people who are coming together to tackle that and to work together and to build a community that can address it. And, you know, and I think we want to work with loads of different types of people and loads of different women. And I truly believe that if we can find a diverse community of women to come together, that we can make things better. And I think we've seen over the course of the, you know, last 50 years, if we think about, you know, the Stonewall riots being marked last year, we think about the course of history, not just legislative change, because obviously that's one aspect, but also societal change. And the other day somebody was talking to me about you know, same-sex adoption and how that's really only been a thing for the last 10 years. And that's amazing to think about, really. I mean, that's such a short space of time. And I think we get these changes and we see them, and then we look back and we think, I can't believe that's only been 5 years, 10 years. And so I think it's good to mark the things that have progressed and know that there will always be something else to address, but that's our job, and that should keep us going to come together as a community.
Ali, reasons to be hopeful, do you think, for women in the LGBT community? Give us some hope.
Listen, as long as there are women like this out there making changes for good, then of course there's hope. And, you know, we are half of the population, and it is about visibility. It's about giving women a place to express their voices, and it's also about standing up and confronting in the right way, in a positive way, where we see others within the community who are not putting women on the platform that we deserve to be, or who are speaking in a way that is not right. You know, I challenged a couple of my friends who've been joking on Twitter about Harvey Weinstein and in relation to the gay community, and I personally don't think that's right. That's kind of like, you know, horrific experience for hundreds of women that man caused, and you know, we need to call out stuff like that. And I think it's not easy, because what we are fighting is a microcosm of what women in general experience, but with added interest, added interest, if you like. But of course there's hope, because, you know, we are brilliant, and there are so many brilliant women out there doing brilliant things, and what we need to do is to make those things visible.
And Helen, a final thought from you on being a visible lesbian, as we all are on this Zoom, incredibly visible. Are you feeling hopeful?
Absolutely. You know, every day. I mean, you know, I think a lot of people in the LGBTQ plus community feel like if your kind of sexuality, your gender and your LGBTQism, if you like, shouldn't be, you know, the most important thing about you. But I have to say that it's the favourite thing I have about myself is that, and the fact that I get to share that and to educate people, you know, not just online with my social media following, who, you know, I love my followers. We have this amazing community who, you know, and they're not all LGBTQ plus. I have incredible allies that are part of my community online, but also with the work that I do with the BBC, in getting to really kind of showcase diversity, showcase intersectionality every day. It's top of my list, you know, in everything that I do, because ultimately there are people out there who, if they, you know, they can't be out, they don't have a voice. And so it's really up to us who have, you know, the safety, the confidence, the ability to scream and shout about how, you know, how great it is and how, you know, incredible we all are. I think, you know, I love it. I love our community, and it's you know, it's so important to me, and I see it every day with you know, my peers or my colleagues who are learning, educating themselves, and kind of then going off and sharing that. There's absolutely hope.
And Maud, Helen makes it a point that, you know, it's all about using your platform as well. Are you feeling positive, and do you feel like using your platform is something that can inspire others?
Yes, I'm feeling positive. I think there's a real sense of solidarity across from women. We could see more of it, amplifying each other's voices, championing the different causes, and also ensuring that we always remember to remember the disadvantaged, you know, lesbian asylum seekers, lesbian mothers, refugees, homeless young people. So we always have to remember the disadvantage in our community. So I see a lot of that. I see there's a lot of, if there's ignorance that is challenged, I see a lot of lesbian women supporting their trans sisters. So we're in a space where there is hope, and we can do a lot to utilize our platform to challenge, to amplify each other's voices, to share, to network, like Ali said. We need to network a lot more and to support each other as women.
I think we should end on that euphoric note. Thank you very much, Maud, and thank you to Helen, Ali and Joe for joining us, and to you at home. That is the end of our Lesbian Visibility Week. First ever DIVA Zoom. Thank you for being brilliant. Now we're going to have that excruciating moment where we all try and log off the Zoom and it's all just a bit awkward, so should we all just do that now? Thank you very much.